Commander Marcus had worked at the Imperial Station for 43 years. He was an old man now, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. The station orbited a dying star, and it was one of the most lonely places in the entire galaxy. Marcus spent most of his time alone, maintaining machines and keeping records. He had very few friends and he preferred it that way. There was one job that Marcus did every single day. He maintained the life support systems for the prisoner in cell 3821 Alpha. But Marcus never went into that cell. Nobody went into that cell. The prisoner had been locked away for 3821 years, and in all that time, only a few people had dared to enter the chamber. None of them had come out the same. The last keeper to go inside was a man named Thomas. That was 200 years ago. Thomas had entered the cell in the morning, looking nervous but determined. He came out screaming. His mind was broken. He spent the rest of his life in the medical ward, sitting in a white room, staring at nothing. He never spoke again. Nobody knew what he had seen in there. Marcus always felt a chill when he thought about Thomas. He made sure to never go near the cell door unless absolutely necessary. Instead, he used automated systems to feed the prisoner. He pressed buttons on a console and machines did the work. The food went through tubes into the cell. That was all. He never had to see the creature. He never had to be in the same room as it. But Marcus knew what the prisoner looked like. He had seen it on screens and in old photographs. It was called the Sentinel. The creature was like a cat, but not like any cat that Marcus had ever heard of. It had fur that shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and change. The fur would glow with blues and purples and greens, and then those colors would fade into reds and oranges. The colors moved across its body like waves in the ocean. The creature's eyes were the most terrible part. They were large and golden, and they seemed to contain an intelligence that was far beyond anything human. When Marcus looked at old video recordings of the Sentinel, he felt like the creature was looking directly at him, even though the recording was hundreds of years old. Nobody knew where the Sentinel had come from. The oldest records in the station's archives said very little. The creature had been brought to the Imperial Station thousands of years ago, before even Marcus's great-great-grandparents were born. The records did not explain why it was a prisoner or what it had done. They only said that it must never be released and that it must never be left alone. The barriers that held it in place were very strong. They had been built by the greatest scientists of ancient times, and they had held for over 3,000 years. Marcus sometimes wondered about the creature. Was it lonely? Was it angry? Did it understand why it was locked away? Marcus knew these were foolish thoughts. The Sentinel was a prisoner and that was all he needed to know. It did not matter what the creature felt or thought. It only mattered that it stayed locked away and did not hurt anyone. Then, on a cold morning, everything changed. Marcus was drinking tea in his small room when his personal console beeped. A message appeared on the screen. It was from the Emperor himself. Marcus's hands began to shake. The Emperor never sent messages to ordinary people like him. There must be something very wrong. Marcus read the message slowly. The words seemed to swim before his eyes. The Emperor had decided to send a new keeper to the station. This keeper would be a human, a prisoner who had committed crimes against the Empire. The prisoner would be given a choice: death or service. The service would be to feed the Sentinel and maintain the cell. The new keeper would arrive within 2 weeks. Marcus read the message 3 times. His tea grew cold in his cup. For 43 years he had done this job alone. The thought of another person being here, especially near the cell, filled him with dread. What if the new keeper was careless? What if they went into the chamber? What if something went wrong? Marcus looked out his window at the vast emptiness of space. The dying star hung in the darkness, slowly burning away. Somewhere on this station the Sentinel waited in its cell. For 3,821 years, it had waited. And now, a human criminal was coming to feed it. Marcus did not know if that was a good idea or a bad one. He only knew that everything was about to change. He finished his cold tea and prepared the station for the arrival of the transport ship. He cleaned the preparation chamber where the new keeper would receive instructions. He checked all the security systems. He made sure everything was ready. But as he worked, Marcus could not shake a feeling of unease. Something told him that this new keeper would be different from the others. Something told him that this human would actually enter the cell. And something told him that when that happened, the station would never be the same again. The days passed slowly. Marcus waited. He maintained the machines. He fed the Sentinel through the automated systems as he had done for 43 years. And he wondered what kind of person the Emperor would send. On the day of arrival, Marcus stood at the landing platform and watched the transport ship descend through the atmosphere. As the ship touched down and the doors opened, a single figure stepped out. He was a man, perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair and the hard look of someone who had lived a difficult life. He was wearing prisoner's clothing and chains. His name was Calyx. Marcus looked at him and saw no fear in his eyes. Calyx looked at the Imperial station around him, at the vastness of the place, and then at Marcus. "So," Calyx said quietly, "I am to feed a monster." "Not a monster," Marcus replied, though he was not entirely sure if that was true. "A prisoner. And you must never go near it. You must never enter the chamber. Do you understand?" Calyx smiled slightly. "We will see," he said. Marcus felt his unease grow deeper. Calyx stood in the preparation chamber, staring at the walls covered with warnings and instructions. Red letters screamed at him from every direction. Never touch the prisoner. Never remain in the chamber longer than necessary. Never make eye contact. Never speak to it. The words were repeated over and over, as if someone had wanted to make absolutely certain that no one would forget them. Marcus stood beside him, watching carefully. The old commander had a medical scanner in his hands, the kind used to check for injuries or psychological damage. His face was serious and worried. He kept glancing at Calyx as if trying to decide whether the young man would survive even one day in this place. "Listen to me carefully," Marcus said, his voice low and grave. "The creature in that cell is not like anything you have ever seen before. It is not human. It is not even close to human. It was old when humanity was still learning how to make fire. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Calyx nodded slowly. He had been told many things since arriving at the Imperial station. They had shown him files and pictures and old recordings. They had explained the security systems and the feeding procedures. They had warned him about the previous keepers. One had gone insane. One had died of a heart attack. One had simply disappeared and no one knew what happened to him. "I understand," Calyx said quietly. "No, you do not," Marcus replied firmly. "You cannot understand. No one can until they have been near it. That is why I am telling you now. The creature is beautiful, and that is the most dangerous thing about it. It will make you want to look at it. It will make you want to talk to it. It will make you feel like it is not a prisoner at all, but something wonderful and impossible. That is when you must be most careful. That is when it is most deadly." Calyx listened to the words, but he was not afraid. He had already been broken by life. He had already lost everything that mattered to him. His mother was dead. His friends had abandoned him. He had spent 5 years in prison for stealing food and medicine to survive. Nothing could frighten him more than what he had already endured. In a strange way, being sent to this lonely station to feed a mysterious creature seemed less terrifying than the life he had left behind. "How do I feed it?" Calyx asked. Marcus handed him a long metal rod with a sealed container attached to the end. The rod was made of strong material, and the container was locked tight. "You place the food in this container. You push the rod through the opening in the cell. You deposit the food on the platform inside. Then you withdraw the rod and seal the opening. You do this twice each day. In the morning and in the evening. That is all. You never stay in the chamber longer than 2 minutes. You work quickly and you leave. Do you understand?" "I understand," Calyx said. "If anything seems wrong, if anything seems different, you contact me immediately," Marcus continued. "If the creature approaches you, you do not hesitate. You run. You get out of the chamber and you seal the door. Do not try to be brave. Do not try to make contact. Just run. Do you understand?" Calyx nodded again. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "I have done this job for 43 years. I am still alive because I follow these rules. You will follow them too, or you will not stay alive. This is not a game. This is not a test. This is survival." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The old commander looked into the young man's eyes, searching for something. Perhaps he was looking for fear. Perhaps he was looking for understanding. Perhaps he was just looking for any sign that Calyx would take this seriously. "I am ready," Calyx said finally. Marcus released him and stepped back. "Then go. The creature has not been fed since yesterday. It will be hungry. Do what you must do and come back out. Quickly." Calyx picked up the feeding rod and walked toward the sealed door. His heart was beating fast now, even though he tried to stay calm. The door was enormous, made of dark metal with locks and security systems all along its edges. It looked like the door to a tomb or a vault. Something ancient and important was kept behind that door. As he approached, the door began to hiss and slide open. Cold air rushed out, and Calyx felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The temperature in the preparation chamber dropped several degrees. He could see darkness inside the cell, but as his eyes adjusted, he began to see movement. Something was waking up in there. Calyx took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world changed. The air itself seemed different. It was thick and heavy as if it had weight. The light in the chamber came from somewhere above, but it was dim and strange. And then the creature's eyes opened. They were golden. Vast. Ancient. Calyx had seen pictures of them, but no picture could prepare him for the reality. Those eyes contained intelligence and power and something else that he could not name. The eyes of the sentinel opened slowly, like the rising of a sun in some distant world. The creature did not move. It did not growl or hiss or show any sign of aggression. It simply opened its eyes and looked at Calyx. And in that moment, everything that Marcus had told him seemed both completely true and completely wrong at the same time. The creature was dangerous. Yes. But it was also something else. Something that Calyx could not explain. His hands trembled slightly as he walked to the feeding platform. He placed the container of food down carefully. The entire time he could feel the creature watching him. Not with hunger. Not with anger. But with something that felt almost like interest. Calyx turned to leave, but he could not help himself. For just a moment he paused. For just a moment he looked directly into those golden eyes. And the creature looked back. Then Calyx ran. He left the chamber and the door sealed behind him. His heart was pounding in his chest like a drum. Marcus was waiting outside, medical scanner ready. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked urgently. "No," Calyx said, breathing heavily. "I am fine." "Did anything unusual happen? Did the creature attack? Did it speak to you?" "No," Calyx replied. "Nothing unusual. It just looked at me." Marcus frowned, studying him carefully with the scanner. After a long moment he nodded slowly. "That is good. That is very good. You may live through this after all." But Marcus's words did nothing to calm Calyx's racing mind. Because in those golden eyes, Calyx had seen something that he knew would change everything. Calyx had been at the Imperial Station for 5 months now. He had fallen into a rhythm with his duties. Every morning at 7 o'clock he would wake in his small room. Every morning at 8 o'clock he would prepare the food for the sentinel. Every morning at 9 o'clock he would enter the chamber, place the food on the platform and leave within 2 minutes. He repeated this same routine every evening as well. It was a simple life, but it was his life. And with each passing day, something inside him began to change. At first, Calyx followed Marcus's instructions perfectly. He entered the chamber quickly, did his job and left immediately. He never looked at the creature longer than necessary. He never spoke. He never hesitated. But as the weeks passed he began to notice small things. The sentinel never attacked him. The creature never threatened him. In fact, the creature barely moved at all. By the second month, Calyx started to wonder about the warnings. Was the creature really as dangerous as Marcus claimed? Or was it simply a prisoner just like Calyx had been a prisoner? The thought troubled him. It made him question everything he had been told. By the third month, Calyx made a small decision that would change everything. Instead of running out of the chamber immediately after feeding the creature, he paused for just a few extra seconds. He lingered. He looked around the vast cell and noticed things he had not seen before. The floor was smooth and empty. There was no furniture. There was no decoration. Just empty space and darkness stretching out in all directions. The sentinel lived in absolute emptiness. That thought stayed with Calyx. He kept thinking about it. He imagined what it would be like to spend thousands of years in a completely empty cell with nothing to do and no one to talk to. The loneliness of it seemed impossible to bear. By the fourth month, Calyx did something that directly violated protocol. He sat down in the chamber. He had placed the food on the platform as usual. But instead of leaving, he walked to the opposite side of the chamber, as far from the creature as possible, and he sat down on the cold floor. His heart was pounding. He was terrified that Marcus would find out. He was terrified that the creature would attack. But nothing happened. The sentinel simply watched him. They sat in silence for 5 minutes. Then Calyx got up and left. He sealed the door behind him and waited for the alarms. He waited for Marcus to arrive with security guards. He waited for punishment. But nothing came. No one had noticed. His cameras had malfunctioned that day, Marcus would later explain. It was just a coincidence. After that day, Calyx's visits to the chamber became longer. He began to stay in the cell for 10 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 30 minutes. He would sit in the darkness and simply exist in the same space as the creature. Slowly, a strange kind of peace began to settle over him. On the 6th month, Calyx broke protocol in a bigger way. He spoke to the creature. "Hello," he said quietly, his voice echoing in the vast empty chamber. "My name is Calyx. The creature did not respond. Its eyes simply followed him as he moved around the cell. Calyx sat down and continued talking. He told the creature about his childhood. He told it about his mother, who had died when he was young. He told it about the hunger and the cold and the fear. He told it about the choices that had led him to steal and to end up in prison. He told it about his crimes and his guilt and his shame. Hours passed. Calyx talked and the creature listened. When Calyx finally left the chamber, he felt lighter than he had in years. It was as if he had finally told his story to someone who would understand. Marcus noticed the change in Calyx immediately. The young man seemed different, calmer, more at peace. But when the commander asked him what was happening, Calyx simply shook his head and said nothing was wrong. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Calyx's visits to the chamber became longer and longer. He would spend hours in there, sometimes just sitting in silence, sometimes talking about his life and his thoughts and his feelings. He read books aloud to the creature. He asked it questions that he knew it could not answer. He treated the chamber as if it were a sanctuary, a place where he could be completely honest about who he was. During this time, Calyx did something else. He began to research the Sentinel's history. He spent his free time in the station's archives, digging through old records and encrypted files. Most of what he found was confusing or incomplete. But gradually, pieces of the story began to emerge. One night, buried deep in the oldest files, Calyx discovered something that made him stop breathing. It was a single paragraph, written in an ancient style of English. The text was fragmented and faded, but the meaning was clear. The Sentinel had not been captured as a prisoner of war. The creature had not been imprisoned as punishment. The Sentinel had volunteered to be locked away. Thousands of years ago, the creature had contained within itself something terrible, something dangerous, something that threatened entire civilizations. And the Sentinel had chosen to lock itself away to protect the universe from that danger. For 3,821 years, the creature had sacrificed itself for beings it did not even know. It had given up its freedom, its life, its everything so that others could live. Calyx read those words over and over until he had them memorized. He felt tears streaming down his face as the truth settled into his heart. The Sentinel was not a prisoner, was a hero. And for thousands of years, humanity had treated it like a monster. That night, Calyx did something that no keeper had done in centuries. He entered the chamber and approached the creature directly. He walked right up to it, ignoring every warning, ignoring every protocol, ignoring his own fear. He knelt before the Sentinel. "I know what you did," Calyx whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know what you sacrificed, and I want you to know that it matters. Your sacrifice matters. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Not anymore." The creature's fur began to glow with soft light. The golden eyes filled with something that looked like tears. And for the first time in nearly 4,000 years, the Sentinel reached out and touched the human with one enormous paw. In that moment, something shifted in the cell. The barrier that held the creature's burden seemed to strengthen. The walls seemed to hold it more gently. And the loneliness that had filled that empty chamber for millennia began, ever so slightly, to fade. The message arrived on a morning that started like any other morning. Commander Marcus was drinking his tea in the observation room, watching the automated systems maintain the cell. He had noticed that Calyx was spending more and more time inside the chamber. He had filed several reports about this, but nothing serious had happened. Calyx remained healthy and stable. There were no signs of psychological damage or mental illness. So Marcus had decided to let it continue. Then the Emperor's personal communication system activated. Marcus nearly dropped his tea. The Emperor never communicated directly with station commanders. There were layers of bureaucracy, chains of command, official channels. Direct communication from the Emperor meant something very important was happening. Marcus pressed the button to accept the message. The Emperor's face appeared on the screen. He was an old man, older than Marcus even, with silver hair and eyes that had seen centuries of rule. His face was calm but serious. When the Emperor spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Commander Marcus," the Emperor said, "I have been reviewing the reports about the Sentinel's cell. You have noted that the metaphysical barrier surrounding the prisoner has increased in strength by 13% over the past 6 months. Can you explain this?" Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He had filed those reports, yes, but he had not expected anyone to actually read them. The barrier had indeed gotten stronger, which was unusual. For thousands of years, the barrier had remained stable. It neither weakened nor strengthened. It simply held. But in recent months it had changed. "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, The barrier's increased strength correlates with the arrival of the new keeper, Calyx. I am not certain of the cause, but the change is measurable and consistent. Send me all data related to this change, the Emperor commanded. And bring Calyx to the Imperial seat immediately. I wish to speak with him personally. The communication ended. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. He did not know what to think. Was the Emperor going to execute Calyx? Was something wrong with the barrier? Marcus quickly gathered all the data he had collected and sent it to the Emperor's office. Then he went to find Calyx. The young man was in the chamber again, of course. He spent most of his time there now. Marcus activated the communication system and told Calyx to prepare for immediate transport to the capital. Calyx emerged from the chamber looking confused but calm. He had changed in the 6 months he had been here. He seemed stronger somehow but also more peaceful. The hardness that had been in his eyes when he arrived was gone. The transport ship arrived 2 hours later. Calyx was taken aboard, still not knowing what was happening. He was given fresh clothing and medical scans. Then the ship took off, leaving the Imperial station behind and heading toward the capital planet where the Emperor ruled. Calyx stood at the window and watched the stars pass. He wondered if he was being taken away to be executed. He wondered if something had gone wrong. But strangely he was not afraid. In the past 6 months spending time with the Sentinel, he had learned that fear was sometimes just an old habit. Some things were worth risking everything for. The capital was massive. The Emperor's palace was the largest structure Calyx had ever seen. Guards in formal uniforms escorted him through endless corridors. They treated him with respect, not like a prisoner, which confused him even more. Finally, he was brought to a large chamber where the Emperor sat alone on a throne made of materials that shimmered with light. The Emperor rose and descended from his throne. He studied Calyx carefully as if trying to see inside the young man's mind. "You have spent considerable time in the chamber with the Sentinel," the Emperor said. This was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty," Calyx replied. "I know it violated protocol, but The barrier has strengthened," the Emperor interrupted. "For thousands of years, it remained stable. For thousands of years, it held the creature's burden exactly as it was designed to hold it. But since you arrived, the barrier has grown stronger. My scientists cannot explain this. The metaphysical forces that sustain the barrier do not respond to physical maintenance. They should not change. And yet they have. Why?" Calyx took a breath. He decided to tell the Emperor the truth. "I spoke to it," Calyx said simply. "I recognized what it was. I acknowledged its sacrifice." The Emperor's eyes widened slightly. "You know what the Sentinel truly is?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I found records in the archives. The creature volunteered to be imprisoned. It contains within itself something dangerous, something that could threaten entire civilizations. It locked itself away to protect others. For thousands of years, it has endured this burden alone." The Emperor walked slowly around Calyx, considering his words. "Very few people know this truth. It is kept secret to prevent panic. If people knew that the Sentinel contained such danger, they would demand that we destroy it. But we cannot destroy it. We do not know how. We can only keep it imprisoned." "But the creature saved us," Calyx said. "It sacrificed itself for us. That is not something a monster does. That is something a hero does." The Emperor stopped walking and looked directly at Calyx. "And you believe that by acknowledging this sacrifice, by treating the Sentinel with honor rather than fear, the barrier has been strengthened?" "I believe that loneliness weakens everything," Calyx said quietly. "For thousands of years, the creature has been alone with its burden. No one visited it. No one spoke to it. No one acknowledged what it had done. Loneliness breaks things. But recognition, honor, companionship, these things strengthen things. The barrier grew stronger because the creature is no longer completely alone." The Emperor was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. It was softer, more thoughtful. "You understand what you are saying? You are asking me to change a policy that has been in place since before my ancestors were born. You are asking me to acknowledge the truth about what has been kept hidden in darkness for millennia." "I am asking for recognition," Calyx said. "For dignity. For truth. The Sentinel saved us. It deserves to be remembered for that, not imprisoned and forgotten." The Emperor walked to a window and gazed out at his vast empire. Billions of people lived out their lives below him, completely unaware that they existed because a creature had voluntarily sacrificed itself. Completely unaware that they owed their existence to an act of heroism. "You will return to the station," the Emperor said finally. "You will continue your service. But you will no longer serve as a convict. You will be appointed as the official guardian of the Sentinel. Your rank will be commander equal to Marcus. You will oversee the cell. You will choose those who might serve after you. And you will ensure that what the Sentinel has done is never forgotten. Calyx could not speak. Tears were running down his face. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he managed to say. The Emperor turned to face him. "Do not thank me. Thank the Sentinel. It is the one owed a debt that we can never fully repay." 23 years had passed since Calyx had first entered the chamber of the Sentinel. His hair was now completely silver, and his face was marked with the deep lines of age. His body had grown frail and his movements were slow. But his eyes remained bright and full of purpose. Every day he still visited the chamber. Every day he still sat with the creature that had become his closest friend. The Imperial Station had changed dramatically in those 2 decades. What had once been a place of fear and secrecy had transformed into something entirely different. The Forbidden Chamber was no longer forbidden. Instead, it had become a place of pilgrimage. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and ordinary citizens from across the Empire came to learn about the Sentinel. They came to understand the truth that had been hidden for so long. Calyx had written a book about his experiences. He had titled it, The Guardian's Testament. In it, he described his first terrifying encounter with the creature, his gradual understanding of its true nature, and the profound friendship that had developed between them over the years. The book had spread throughout the Empire like wildfire. Everyone wanted to read it. Everyone wanted to understand the story of the human who had befriended the Sentinel. Universities began to teach about the Sentinel as part of their history curriculum. Children learned that their civilization existed because of a creature's sacrifice. Artists created paintings and sculptures inspired by the golden eyes and luminescent fur. Musicians composed symphonies in honor of the creature's heroism. The Sentinel had gone from being a shameful secret to being a symbol of what true sacrifice meant. But Calyx knew that his time was running out. His body was failing him. The doctors had told him that he had perhaps a year left to live, maybe less. He had made peace with this. He had lived a full life, a life that had meaning and purpose. He had done what he came to do. The last thing Calyx wanted to accomplish before he died was to pass on his responsibilities to someone worthy. Someone who could continue what he had started. Someone who could ensure that the Sentinel was never forgotten. He had spent the past 2 years training his successor. Her name was Eleanor, and she was only 26 years old. She had come to the station as a volunteer, one of hundreds of people who had applied for the position after reading Calyx's book. Eleanor had kind eyes and a gentle voice. She was intelligent and compassionate. Most importantly, she understood that her role was not to guard a prisoner, but to honor a hero. Calyx had taught Eleanor everything he knew. He had taken her into the chamber dozens of times. He had shown her how to sit with the Sentinel in comfortable silence. He had taught her how to speak to the creature, how to share stories, how to create a sense of connection across the vast gulf that separated human from something far older and far wiser. Eleanor had learned quickly and well. She was ready. The day came when Calyx knew he could no longer delay the passing of the torch. His breathing had become labored. His hands shook constantly. He could barely walk without assistance. But he wanted to be present for Eleanor's first solo visit to the chamber. He wanted to witness this moment. They walked together through the corridors of the station. Calyx moved slowly, leaning on Eleanor's arm for support. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. Everything that needed to be said had already been said during the long months of training. When they reached the chamber, Calyx stopped at the observation window. He was too weak now to enter the cell himself. His days of sitting with the Sentinel were over. But he could still watch. He could still bear witness. Eleanor stood before the sealed door. She was dressed in the formal uniform of a guardian, a position that had not existed before Calyx created it. Her face was calm and focused. She had studied the ancient protocols. She had learned the history of the Sentinel. She was ready to take on this sacred duty. "Go," Calyx said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Go and honor what it has sacrificed." Eleanor nodded. She placed her hand on the control panel, and the massive door began to slide open. Cold air rushed out, and the temperature in the observation room dropped. Eleanor took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway. Calyx watched as his successor walked into the chamber. The Sentinel's eyes opened slowly, those vast golden eyes that had captivated Calyx for so many years. The creature's luminescent fur began to glow, and the patterns on its body shifted and changed. But instead of the colors shifting into sharp, aggressive tones, they softened into gentle blues and purples and greens. Eleanor approached without hesitation or fear. She walked across the vast empty cell and knelt before the creature, just as Calyx had done so many years ago. She did not speak. She simply knelt, her head bowed in respect and honor. The sentinel lowered its enormous head and gently touched Eleanor's shoulder with one paw. Calyx felt tears running down his weathered face. This was what he had worked toward. This was what mattered. The sentinel was no longer alone. The creature would be remembered and honored and cared for. The burden it carried would be recognized and respected. Behind Eleanor, in the corridor outside the chamber, stood dozens of other people. They were the next generation of volunteers. They had all applied to be part of the Guardian rotation. They would take turns visiting the chamber, each spending time with the creature, each adding their own compassion and recognition to the barrier that held back the Sentinel's terrible burden. The Forbidden Chamber had become a temple. The prisoner had become a teacher. And humanity had finally learned to see past its fears to recognize true heroism when it stood before them. Calyx was led away by medical attendants. His work was done. He had changed an empire's understanding of itself. He had transformed a place of darkness into a place of light. He had shown that a single act of compassion, a single moment of recognition, could ripple outward through time and touch the lives of billions. As the old guardian was taken to his room to rest, he looked back one final time at the golden eyes of the creature he had befriended. In that ancient gaze, he saw acceptance and gratitude and the quiet knowledge that the burden, though never fully lifted, was no longer borne in complete isolation. The universe was different now. And it had all begun with a human convict who dared to approach the cell, armed with nothing but compassion and the willingness to see the monster for what it truly was. A savior.